Born in 356 BC, Alexander was the son of King Philip II of Macedon and Olympias, a royal princess with a reputation for mysticism and ambition. And while historians will tell you that Alexander's father was a brilliant strategist who turned Macedonia into a military powerhouse, Greek mythology tells a different story. Some legends say that Alexander's father wasn't Philip, but Zeus himself, yes, the king of the gods. According to myth, Zeus had a habit of transforming into animals to seduce women, and in this case, he took the form of a serpent to sleep with Olympias. So while historians may point to Philip as Alexander's biological father, some Greeks would insist he had divine blood coursing through his veins. From a young age, it was clear that Alexander was no ordinary child. By the time he was just 12 years old, he had already tamed an unbreakable stallion named Bucephalus, a horse so wild that even seasoned warriors trembled at the thought of riding it. Legend has it that Alexander saw something others didn't. He noticed the horse was afraid of its own shadow. In a moment of brilliance, he turned the horse around, gained its trust, and rode it with unparalleled skill. This would become a symbol of his ability to conquer seemingly impossible challenges, a foreshadowing of what was to come in his adult life. But it wasn't just his prowess with animals that set him apart. When Alexander was 13 years old, his father, King Philip, enlisted the great philosopher Aristotle to tutor the young prince. Under Aristotle's mentorship, Alexander was not only taught the basics of philosophy, mathematics, and the sciences, but also learned about the world's greatest civilizations. Yet, as powerful as his education was, Aristotle also taught him the harsh reality of the world. Alexander learned to view non-Greeks as inferior. Thankfully, as we'll see later, Alexander's worldview would evolve in a way that would shape the course of history. At the age of 16, while his father waged war elsewhere, Alexander was left in charge of Macedonia. And he didn't waste the opportunity. Alexander led an expedition to defeat the Mighty, a tribe that lived in what is now modern-day Bulgaria. He didn't just defeat them, he founded a city there, named it Alexandropolis, and placed Macedonian settlers in charge. By the time he was 20, Alexander found himself thrust onto the throne after his father's assassination. But rather than face an easy path, Alexander's reign was immediately challenged. Rival factions in Greece sought to overthrow him, and some even thought about returning to the old ways of independence. It took only a few months for Alexander to secure his position. He was quick to eliminate any threats, silencing potential uprisings by taking ruthless action. Alexander's true ambition wasn't just to rule Macedonia. He had his eyes set on a much larger prize, Persia, the superpower of the time. Led by King Darius III, Persia had long been a thorn in the side of the Greeks, repeatedly attempting to crush their spirit, but Alexander saw an opportunity to avenge Greece's ancient wounds, and to create an empire unlike any the world had ever seen. In 334 BC, at the age of 22, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, now known as the Dardanelles, and entered the Persian heartland. His first major test came at the Battle of the Granicus River, where Alexander's forces faced the might of the Persian Empire's troops. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Alexander's tactics and fearless leadership led to a decisive victory. It was the first of many, and it marked the beginning of his unstoppable march eastward. But the real turning point came in 333 BC at the Battle of Issus. Here, Alexander faced Darius III's forces head-on. Though outnumbered by nearly 2-1, Alexander's army used superior tactics, shifting formations and using cavalry effectively, to shatter the Persian lines. Darius, in a desperate retreat, even abandoned his wife and children on the battlefield. And in an ironic twist, Darius's own mother, in a show of utter despair, publicly adopted Alexander as her son. This symbolic act was a powerful message, not just to the Persians, but to the entire region. Alexander wasn't just a conqueror, he was now a symbol of destiny. Following his victory at Issus, Alexander didn't slow down. He marched into Egypt, where he was hailed as a liberator and crowned as pharaoh. This was an important moment in his journey. Not only was he cementing his power, But he was also becoming a figure that transcended cultures. In Egypt, he visited the ancient oracle of Amun at Siwa, where the priests declared him the son of Zeus, something that would only fuel his belief in his divinity and destiny. Meanwhile, Darius, desperate to stop the unstoppable, repeatedly sent offers of peace. But Alexander rejected each one. He wasn't looking for negotiations, he was looking for total victory. For the next several years, Alexander pushed deeper into Persia, winning battle after battle, each one showcasing his unparalleled military genius. However, the war wasn't without cost. His army, worn and weary after years of fighting, began to show signs of fatigue, but Alexander was determined to see it through. In 331 BC, he faced Darius one last time at the Battle of Gaugamela. The Persian army was massive, but once again Alexander used his brilliant tactics to turn the tide. The battle ended with a resounding victory for Alexander, and Darius fled once more, never to return. With the fall of Persia, Alexander became the ruler of an empire that stretched from Greece all the way to India. Yet despite his success, he was always driven by the need for more. More land, more power, more glory. By the time Alexander died in 323 BC, at just 32 years old, he had created an empire unlike any the world had ever seen. And while his death was sudden and surrounded by mystery, his legacy would live on for centuries. His conquest changed the world in ways that still ripple through history. But perhaps the most interesting thing about Alexander wasn't just his victories, but his ability to bring different cultures together, spreading Greek philosophy, art, and science across the vast lands he conquered. In a way, he didn't just build an empire, he began the process of globalization. So, was Alexander truly great? Well, in a world of instant fame and social media followers, perhaps he never needed an Instagram account. His story was written in the hearts of empires, and his name, though centuries old, still commands respect. Alexander the Great might not have been perfect, but there's no denying his impact on the world. And that's the legend of Alexander the Great. What do you think? Was he a hero, a tyrant, or something in between?